Welcome to Hindsight Hacking. I'm Corey Carter.
And I'm Ron Cool, and we've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs hacking their hindsight to give you better foresight.
And now we're bringing you those same great interviews along with other mindset hacks, visibility hacks, and traffic hacks, and more to get you all the tools you need to gain more visibility and gain more traffic.
And of course, gain more sales. So head over to gethhm.com/toolbox to get all the free resources to help you get more.
And so, without further ado, let's get to it. What is going on, everybody? We have a treat for you. Mr. Erik Cabral, founder of Podmax, among other places. So, for everyone that needs to get to know Erik, get ready. He is another one of these success stories that left corporate America after 20 years. So, speaking to Ron and I's heart, but then he went headfirst into the real estate market. He runs a show or a brand, on-air brands, all about some podcasting, and is the founder of Podmax, which, if you've been paying attention, we've been talking a lot about over the last few weeks. So we had to bring the co-founder on the show, Mr. Erik Cabral. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. I mean, it's just good to be here. I love the intro. The intro has a lot of energy, so thanks for that. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Erik, we're stoked to have you. One, I have to point out the Macintosh that's behind you, because there's not a lot of people that's going to know that, but that's what I learned graphics on right there. That little man. Pixel by pixel by pixel. Right?
Pixel by pixel. The first time I used that thing, I was in, I don't know if it was School of Visual Arts, but it might have been my associates in Sullivan County, upstate New York. But I remember seeing an army of them in the library, and I was like, what can I do with this? And then started playing around. I'm like, wait a minute, this does typography. I don't have to cut and paste. And, oh my God, I could start, printing things out and like kerning, and like everything was just changed and rocked my world when those things came.
Oh yeah. No, I went to design school and worked on that, and then, got in the real world, and then everyone's like, you can't make money with design. I was like, oh, okay.
Remember when we would say I'm a graphic designer? People would go, what's that? No, it was at the time in the late 90s, it was called I'm a commercial artist. A commercial artist, yeah. Commercial artist. What's that?
Yeah, because graphic designer, like my mom was so mad at me.
Yeah.
What do you mean was?
Anyway, before we get too far down the rabbit hole here, Erik, why don't you take a moment to kind of tell everyone your story a little bit?
Yeah, of course. More than happy. So let's see. You guys already mentioned the corporate America thing. It's been exactly 23 years now. Now that's 2021 that I've left. I was in corporate America for 23 years. Sorry, not left. But I was in for 22 years. And it was a typical grind, cubicle life, burning the candle at both ends at times in order to sort of appease the gods. And I realized after being laid off for the second time, which I always say was truly blessed that it only happened twice in that 20 plus career, I did an audit. I was like, what can I do? What can change here? I'm bored. I feel like I've hit a glass ceiling and I'm making decent money, but it hasn't really changed over 10 years. So I checked in with my wife, the CEO of the household, and I was like, hey, let's put the pen to paper, and how much runway, how much savings do we have? And she was like, we probably got a couple years. You're good. And plus she makes a decent salary. So I was like, would you mind if I tried something new, something different? What are you thinking? I'm like, real estate investing. She's like, wait, what are you talking about? You're creative. You don't know anything about investing. So I went nuts. I started reading books. The aha moment was when I was reading Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the purple pill, as those like to call it. And I was literally punching the steering wheel in anger, frustration, and inspiration, in that I was a fool all along. I'm like, no offense to anyone who's at the grind now, but you don't realize that we're sort of programmed to be in this industrial mindset and just keep working 20, 30, 40 years for that gold watch. which we all know never comes anymore. So I was like, why am I building and making millions, literally millions for these Fortune 100 companies when I can maybe try to do this for myself and my family as opposed to building for someone else who doesn't even know my name? So that's when I was like, let me see what this can do. So I started networking and buying courses and attending networking. Just went all in, build a network, which all culminated into what you guys know of as On Air Brands and Podmax now.
It's so crazy. It's awesome that you had the support that of your wife and Ron and I. We both have been in that situation with the going through the grind, going through the daily making money for someone else, and the parts that we loved was the development of people and different things on that aspect. But we never really cared about the places we were working for, the people we were working for. But we still grinded. And we still tried to grow and climb that corporate ladder. And so but once we started working together, we realized, okay, now we can build something off on our own. We can do this for ourselves, that same kind of ahas. But it took a few conversations with the CEOs of our houses to actually allow and make that occur.
Maybe some begging.
Some begging, yes. Some proof,
some
work and building on the side before we left that position. But walk us through that first year of real estate. I mean, you talked about diving head first, because that is such a shift of graphic artistry or any way like that, right? And so me being on this podcast and doing all the things Ron and I do, like that was a complete 180 for me as well. And so walk us through that first year of successes and opportunities.
The first year was really about finding people that knew more than I did, which wasn't hard, right? I could easily find people who were smarter than I was. And it was also figuring out myself, right? Checking my ego, my insecurities, and understanding like, okay, I have a lot to learn here. I'm 40 something. I am starting a new career. I didn't anticipate going back to creative. I really thought this is my legacy. I'm going to build a portfolio worth millions and millions of dollars, and then just walk off into the sunset and sip margaritas on the beach with my wife and watch the kids, go play with the sharks. So I started to go to real estate events. So because of the Rich Dad Poor Dad, this is funny because you guys are in the industry. I got an invite on Facebook that said, "Hey, Rich Dad Poor Dad's going to be in Edison, New Jersey," which was 2 minutes from my house. So I'm like, "Oh, Kiyosaki's going to be there." And I slowly realized he was not going to be there, but his organization was in my town and it was free. And like, I could show up and sit there and take notes, and it was a full day and it was free. And did I mention that it was free? And I was like, cool. So they just hit us with a fire hose of information. Like, you could do wholesaling, you could do buy rentals, you could do flipping, and they're like, okay, do you know how to implement any of that? And no, I have no idea what you're talking about. So they're like, well, it just so happens if you run to the back of the room, well, we can sell you a $5,000 weekend. And I'm like, okay, cool. And you get an iPad. Actually, it's not an iPad. It's a knockoff from Lenovo. But yeah, you could bring it home to your wife and she'll think that it's an iPad. So I'm like, I got the package. I bought the bar, and then I was in. I got sucked right in. And as I went deeper into the funnel, tens of thousands of dollars later, it opened for me. One of the coaches from South Africa, absolutely amazing woman, said, "This is how you got here." And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't think I've ever told this story before. So she's like, you got an ad on Facebook. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, you came to a free seminar. Yes. And then you bought a program, and then you bought another program, and then you got in, and now you're here, basically. I'm like, oh my God, they're watching me. They knew I bought the Kiyosaki book, and they targeted me. I had no idea. So, but the thing is, don't get me wrong, I learned a ton, of which you guys are experiencing, like branding through association, networking through it, with, building a massive network in a community. Like, I learned a ton. Yeah, it was expensive, but I learned through these programs, but then I was implementing. That's the strategy. A lot of people go, it's a ripoff, don't do it. Well, it's just like the gym. If you join a program and you do nothing with it, that's on you. So, right, I took everything and then I put it into my network, and the real estate community started to notice, like, oh crap, look at this guy. He's got a brand, he's got a website, he knows how to manage social media marketing. Can you help us? So I was a unicorn in this real estate investing space filled with data-driven left-brainers. I was the only creative. So I started to build a client base, which built on-air brands. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast so that I can like interview people that I need to know and learn how to become a successful entrepreneur and have an opportunity to interview Robert Kiyosaki, which all happened, by the way. And they're like, oh, your podcast is awesome. I was just a guest. Can you do that for me? Then that turned into On-Air Brands production and creation of podcasts, which built a podcast network, which built Podmax, as you guys know. So I'll pause there because then there's a whole other Podmax app. Right?
I'll tell you, that story doesn't sound familiar whatsoever. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, like I'm writing down, I was like, gateway drug is what I wrote down when you said Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because everyone kind of starts there. And then exactly, you got sucked into this funnel.
Yeah.
And when you realize it, you're like, oh my gosh.
The zeros and ones. Yeah.
Right?
I'm like Neo, like jump off the building. What?
Yes.
Like, this is all fake.
Totally different now, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't jump off a building yet to try it, but you never know. You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's kind of, after you figured out the matrix, let's just call it that, because now it's fun.
It's the perfect. Now
You've surrounded yourself with people. You've already got a business going, right? Because as right brainers, you look at things differently, right? And you approach the same work differently, right? And some people will say, oh, it's a visionary thing. No, it's just how we think. It's weird. But what was the next thing that you decided to do that was important for you to grow your company to where it is today? And I know that's kind of a bigger question, but
yeah, if I could attribute it to one thing, and this keeps coming up every minute of the day, is the value of building relationships. Like, I mean, this sounds cliche, but seriously, people, authentic relationships, meaning you actually give a crap about the other person you're talking to. And the podcast really taught me how to become a better listener. Right. So that was how I used to attract, like mates. I'm like, oh, hey, future girlfriend and ex-girlfriend. Like, I was just listening. I understood they love men who can listen to them. So I would just listen and regurgitate whatever they said to me. And it got me popular with the ladies and got my wife, to marry me. So then I was like, let me use those skill sets to become a podcaster. And the same thing happened. People were like talking. And I was listening. And then at the end, they were like, I love you. How can I be in your world? All because I just listened to them. So it's like, wow, if I keep doing this more and actually try to give them some value, which I didn't realize at the time, the podcast was the value, the platform and stage for them, right? They're like, oh, dude, I'm getting leads. What are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just putting it out. So it started to just happen organically with no real intention, just like really selfish purposes. Like, I'm trying to put my brand out there. I'm trying to tell my story. This is a good platform. But then I'm also building relationships and getting free mentorship from people who know more than I do. So it was just a win-win-win-win overall. But then as the podcast grew and the community grew, then I was like, wow, this is really powerful because there's just so much that could be offered on all sides. And the magic happens when the mics turn off is what I always say, because that's when I was like, wow, whoa, this is not about the podcast. This is about the relationships.
Yeah.
Yes. And really, mic drop.
Interview's over. Thanks for coming. We appreciate
it. It's so funny. The unintended consequences of when Ron and I launched our show is exactly that. We started off, and we still use this, the podcast gets us free coaching, free mentorship, right? And those are the first few guests that we're trying to get on our show. We're like, we need to learn from this person. Let's go talk to them. And but the relationships that are built off camera, off air is just insane. And forever grateful for every single person that we've been able to meet. I mean, we met the Biz Bros, Luis and Luis, via conversation started to end up on our podcast and their podcast, and because we swapped on that sense. And then, now we do different kinds of work with them, and we have a show with them, right? And
Yes.
then they introduced us to you and Josh, and again, the relationships are second to none with this whole world of podcasting. So, but tell us about, obviously we're very partial to podcasting, and to helping people create and launch and monetize and do all the fun things that you're supposed to do or should do with your show. But you've got on-air brands, and so I know you do some of that same things. Like, walk through your methodology, or just some of the fun tips and tricks that you like to share with your clients with the on-air brands.
Yeah. So, okay. So quick tip for those who are waiting for it. You're like, hey, I'm going to turn this off any second if he doesn't offer some real value that I can implement. So, because like a lot of it's high level strategies, right? That you get it if you're doing it, but if you're not doing it yet, it's like, give me more. So when you have a podcast and you're going to launch something, what we always highly recommend, with I call strategy. I didn't coin that, right? Somebody made that up. The growth strategy is really making sure that the show has mini episodes, right? So say ideally 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 episodes that you have in the bank. So you have this is interview style potentially. Actually, this only works well with interview style. So you have 8 to 12 episodes in the bank, right? And you're also taking those episodes, whatever they are, half hour, an hour, and you're creating maybe 4 to 8 minute episodes, just mini-sodes that of those same guests. And what you want to do is hold those until you're ready to launch all of them. So then when you launch, you actually can hit up every single guest at the same time and say, hey, I just launched the show. Would you promote this to 50 to 100 of your closest friends and family? What that's going to do for you and the algorithms that iTunes loves is that now you have this wave of people listening to the podcast, and the barrier to entry is low, because why wouldn't they commit to a 5-minute episode of someone that is in their network? So now you're getting this crescendo of a bunch of people promoting you at the same time, right? And then on the back end, I didn't even talk about how, like, you want to make sure on iTunes or whatever platform you're using that you're looking for this micro niche, right? You don't want to just say, real estate investing. Like, you want to find like mobile home investing, like something that's micro niche, and try to own that space and category. So that will boost you up in terms of success. So those are sort of the things that we implement with our clients.
I love that. So kind of how we do our show, we do it live, right?
Yeah, I love that.
And that was a struggle in itself, because we used to do it recorded, and there's a couple recordings that will never be out there, right? And so now live, we can't take that risk, so we have to have a conversation prior. But it's live on multiple different streams. Then could be 3 days later or a week later, it's on all the platforms. And then we cut that episode up into, I think we're up to 55 pieces of content. And so we're blasting it out every time we have a show. And now we have a show 5 days a week, because we've built up that bank. Like, we help people, and we're like, don't commit to anything except once a week. Like, be consistent once a week. That's when your people needs to, know they can trust you, that you're going to show up. Right. Yeah. And so many people are like, I'm going to go on every single day. No, you're not. Please don't think that way, because you'll quit. Like, you will stop. That's why it's a bad situation. Yeah. But I love the piece where you're talking about owning your space in a micro niche. Right. Because I think so many people start a podcast. They're like, oh, well, I'm a business entrepreneur. Or relationships. We've helped a lot of people launch in the relationship space. And guess what? That's a really big conversation. Right. And what we want to do is help you niche down, where then you can get on those charts and you can have some social proof, which then in turn can help you get some other guests, which then in turn builds your credibility, which then in turn you just kind of blow up. It's kind of a crazy situation, right? Yeah. So what's your funnest part of what you're doing when you're helping somebody launch a show?
When launching a show, so complete honesty and transparency. On Air Brands has become a well-oiled machine to the point where I operate on the outside, right? So really what my job at this point is, this is, I guess, the answer to your question, finding the relationships and realizing that's a pain point for them. So I don't want to announce it here, but we have a major personality from a huge corporation that we all know who needs a show. And she, well, there's a slight reveal there, wants us to launch it or relaunch it for her. And
may or may not be a she.
Yeah, more than happy to do it for her because
Right.
we know overall, so this is a near and dear and close to her. Everyone who launches a podcast, it's a very close personal project to them, and it's an honor to take on that responsibility and knowing that they trust us. So she trusts us to launch this. So that's my job, is to instill and put out my brand and my personal brand, that people come to us and say, I love and trust you guys, right? Based off all the peripheral stuff, because how can we have literally created a bond of love and trust over an hour-long conversation? I mean, it's done, but branding as a whole, personal branding as a whole, your company, your personal brand, all of that stuff on a subconscious level embeds in people's minds. So when they talk to you, now they're like, I love you. Why is that? Because you've been doing your job all along, creating evergreen content, offering value, all this stuff. So my job is to say, hey, we can do this for you. And then I put it into the machine, and then they work on it. And then now we get the credit for it. I get the credit for it because it's my company. So that's the cool stuff.
Yeah, that's the evergreen piece, the evergreen content. Like we laugh when people are telling us, "Hey, I see you everywhere. I can't get rid of you." I'm like, perfect. That's what we want. And but it makes any sales conversation easy, right? Because it's no longer a sales conversation. It's just a conversation that you're having with an old friend because they feel like they know you already, because we're talking real. We're not talking just surface level stuff with every show, right? Like we get deep and personal. And when you've published, when you publish every single day on a show, right? Like people just get to know you, that the more they listen. So for you, how many shows, podcasts, are you doing? Any solo, any co-hosting? What's kind of your schedule on that?
It's perfectly asked. The question, you framed it perfectly, because I have an answer for that. But I'll tell you the question when it's often asked. I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to sound pretentious because often people go, I love your show. And then I used to ask, which one? Right. Because to most, like even having one podcast, that's a feat, like, oh man, but they don't realize I literally have probably close to half a dozen. So I'm the host of my show, Entrepreneur Circle. I'm the co-host of Capital Hacking, which, heavy into the mindset real estate investing space. I co-host with Josh Carey on Podmax's podcast, co-host on the On Air Brands podcast. Those last two are exactly what you guys do. It's a live stream. So we call it On Air Brands Live, Podmax Live. And like you said, we don't call it a podcast because you guys know it's not necessarily a podcast. It's an overall sort of,
we call it a podcast. It's
a
podcast.
Yeah. Well, okay. So so depending on how you want to frame it, and especially if you're heavy into the audio production and you want to make it sure it shines, we can call it first and foremost a podcast. But anyway, it's those are my main shows. And then I have, other sort of peripheral ones and we produce in-house, over a dozen, which is quickly growing. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's a great business model for those who can figure it out, because it really started with my show. Like I was the one cutting it up and creating the music and doing the ads and doing all the stuff every single day. And I was like, this is kind of a grind in a business, and it's distracting me from my real business. And I was like, what if I just hired an editor? And then that became an automated thing. And it's like, what if I took the promotion of it off my plate? Because I was the one creating all the sound bites and the audiograms. And I was like, okay, give that to a designer. And it's like, what if I took away the show notes? Because I'm still doing this, gotten to the point where like all I do is record and I upload. And then I realized, what if other people want that? They just record and upload. And then that became the service from
Ah,
brands. Yeah.
no, that's so true, because there's a couple things that I want to touch on. One is find your who, right? So you can just focus on what you need to focus on, which is probably selling something, right? And then you have to do something I'm bad at, which is let go and and let them do their job, right? Because I've learned from this crazy entrepreneur thing, and Corey can't answer because I was never this way prior to this being an entrepreneur, even though he used to work with me. I'm a control freak. And I haven't been able to let it go. And my wife, I told my wife this story, and she just laughed at me. I go, "That's not funny. Like it's a problem. Like, because you have to be able to allow someone that you've hired to be creative and do their thing, right? And set parameters. And I am not extremely detailed on those pieces. Corey's much better at that than I am. So when I explain it, I just assume you got that. And then if you mess up, I need you to leave. Like it's a bad situation. Right? But I'm not like that, like outside of there, but it's different when it's your own little baby and you have a vision. And for me, since I have a vision of what I want it to look like, it's easier if I just do it myself. Right?
Yeah.
And so I have to get better at that. But the other piece that I want to talk about, since you have so much stuff going on, and I'm also a calendar fiend, how do you schedule? Like, give us an example of how you go about bucketing your calendar.
Yeah, good question. I used to have a live physical assistant. She actually lived in my town. Anyone who wants that and desires that, because I came from corporate, that's what I was comfortable with. It's like,
Right.
an assistant needs to be physically there.
Right.
So you can go on. I didn't find her this way, but I find that there are Facebook pages where you can find women who left corporate America or never went back, after raising children, but have the amazing skill set to do those things for you. So there's Facebook groups for executive assistants. But anyway, I had her for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, and she was working in the real estate business and then started to work in the multimedia business on her brands. And then I realized when she left, she's like, you know what? I'm going to go look for a full-time job. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? In the interim, let me see what I could do about my calendar. Cause that was like the biggest thing she really helped with. She was literally emailing people, hey, and looking, it's like, that just seems crazy now that I think about it. But Calendly is the best tool that I've ever used. It just took, like you said, Ron, a level of trust for that platform and also getting everyone up to speed, because people were associating that with being pretentious. Like, oh, who do you think you are? Send me a link. And now it's normal. So I'm like, so glad that everyone caught up. So that's been a massive tool. Bucketing my days. So Thursdays is the only day I record my podcast. So I literally have from, morning to evening on my Calendly that says Entrepreneur Circle guest. And then I believe Mondays I do creative sort of tasks. So Ron, you'll appreciate that. I try to devote my day to that. It's not always doesn't always happen. Thursdays I do financial deadlines and administrative, checking emails and stuff like that. But when I started to bucket my time, when I started to move away from to-do lists and started to operate my days and weeks on the calendar and what the calendar is telling me to do in that bucket of time, that was a game changer. Yeah.
I'm writing that down. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Ron and I, we try to follow that calendar so much, but obviously, like even for this show, we knew every week Tuesdays we have a 3:00, interview. But I'm the one that signed up through your Calendly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I
wasn't on my calendar.
Right, on Ron's calendar, even though it's luckily it's always blocked out for this type of thing.
We block it out so it's free, so we don't put something on there. And then we have a Calendly that, like, again, I can understand the whole pretentious thing, and then I'll give it back to Corey since I jumped in. But like, if you go to get on our podcast, you can only pick 2 hours a week that we get you on the podcast, right? And it's 2 different days, and they fill up pretty quickly, right? And So it works in our time, but I never thought of it as someone going there like, oh my gosh, seriously, what's going on? Only Thursday, 3 months from now. That's awful. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely saved a lot, but making sure that we balance the two calendars sometimes it proves a little more challenging. But all right, I want to shift a little bit here and talk about hindsight because hindsight's 2020. We all know if we had a little bit more hindsight going into things, we might make a few better decisions once in a while. So if you had the power to go back with the knowledge that you have now, is there any kind of advice you'd go back and give to a younger Erik?
Yeah. So this is somewhat high level ish strategy, and not an easy task to accomplish, especially in the mindset category. But I realized, especially in this day and age where buying businesses is super critical to the economy now, baby boomers folding their businesses, not realizing they can sell, opportunities like never before when it comes to buying businesses, because there's, everybody knows 99% of businesses fail and 1% make, less than $1 million. And then the rest of them just fail. So like, it's very, very, very slim chances for you as business owners, not to be a Debbie Downer here, to make it in the long run. So the ones that do have some sort of system and process and team. It may not be perfect, but they're operating and they figured something out. So what I realized is if I could go back 3-4 years before building On Air Brands, I would have freaking bought a multimedia company, one that was maybe struggling, one that needed a creative director, needed a strategic, plan. And I would have came in rather than say, hey, would you hire me? I would have been like, how about I buy you? Right. And then I buy it and then I'll either rebrand it or keep it if they have a good brand. But that would have exponentially increased the speed of which what I was trying to do, by tenfold, because now I don't have to hire, I don't have to build processes and buy equipment and find a rental space. Like I'm buying a business that's doing what I want it to do. Now I can shift it, use the pieces, remold, reshape if needed. But yeah, I definitely would have tried to convince myself like, hey, maybe don't start something up, man. Maybe you should look into buying businesses.
I love that. Okay, so you brought it up a little bit, but I want to kind of transition. Let's talk about On Air Brands and kind of everything you do and kind of let the audience know a little bit more about that particular brand that you have.
Yeah. It's such a funny thing because Ron, you understand this, especially because we're coming from the creative industry and just businesses in general. I often offend people when I say this, but when you brand something, try not to brand it with your name. A lot of companies tend to call it, Cool Industries. That actually sounds cool.
Yes.
Or they name it they give it the initials of, the founders. Where to me as a branding guy, it sort of nails on a chalkboard because I'm like, that is so lazy, because what you're doing there is it's sort of an ego trip. But then also, how does it foster a culture or tribe of people that will have ownership over that, right? So my business was called Cabral Design. And I was like, I'm going to call it Cabral Brand now. And then I realized I was hiring legit people like who were, making 6 figures. And I'm like, eventually I want to make a bigger thing. How can I give them ownership? How can I give them something that feels like, hey, I'm part of a big picture. It's not just Cabral's empire. So I was like looking all over for a name. And I thought I was going to call it Amplify Your Brand. And that was all taken. Somebody had it. And I was just so stuck on that name. And I'll never forget this. I was sitting in a diner with my partner at the time. And I was like, he's like, just tell me what the business is about. I'm like, a lot of investors were the clients. And I'm like, because they don't understand social media. They don't know how to get on the air because they don't realize like social media marketing is like, back in the day, NBC, CBS, now it's YouTube and Facebook. They just need to get their voice and their faces on the air. I'm like, wait a second. And I like Google On Air Brands and it was available. And I'm like, oh my God, I literally paused for like 30 seconds and I'm like, Google it again. This has to be a mistake. On Air Brand. It's available here. Facebook's available. Instagram's available. URLs, all the URLs available. I literally walk out into the parking lot and I start crying because I'm like, this is it. I've come up with a name that means everything. Everyone will understand what On Air Brands means because we put your brand, and broadcast it on the air for you. And I was like, this is the world. This is the bee's knees. So I grab every single URL except Twitter. They're the only one that I couldn't grab. And the reason why is the originator of whoever owned this brand. Guess who it was? It was As Seen on TV. They had it all and they let it go. They let it go, like which is what you need to do, Ron. Just let things go. But there's a callback. So I realized that this is something that I want to build because I had a longer sort of goal and picture, to just create this massive thing that everybody can be a part of and want to be a part of. And then that kind of blended itself well and naturally moved into the Podmax mantra and core values.
So fun, so good. All right, so I want to dig in just a little bit because we've mentioned Podmax, but we haven't talked about Podmax, and I'm sure you've heard Ron and I mention this since the event, but Ron didn't even know, other than, hey, book your calendar, we've got some podcast interviews at this thing called Podmax, is what I told him when I signed us up, right? Like, see, he had zero knowledge or expectation. And then I knew just enough that I thought we had 3 interviews, right? Like that was basically Luis, and Luis said, you guys love this. Okay, sure. Done. We're there. You don't have to.
It was on my calendar. I go, what is that?
At least Calendly worked that time.
Yeah. He goes, it's Podmax. I go, what is that?
and so it was hard to get back to Zoom recording interviews, which that was weird that was a challenge because we were used to this platform or style now.
Yeah.
But then, the event itself, like the family that is there is second to none. And as long as you're welcoming us, we will be there because it was just an incredible event. You and Josh have something amazing. Like, when they say like that person's got it, you don't know what it is, but Podmax, that is it. So tell us tell us about Podmax. Tell the people about Podmax. Tell everyone, because everyone definitely needs to know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all of that, Corey. Really, truly do. That makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. What we've grown to know and love about what happened with Podmax, which was and is, think speed dating in podcasting. So you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, you want to get on multiple shows in a day. It's very efficient, right? Well-oiled machine. You get to come in and you record on shows. That's in its simplest form. That's an easy understand. You could digest that. But you guys know it's way more than that, right? It's an event. It's an experience. It's something that modern day networking, people haven't figured it out yet. And what makes virtual networking so special is the connections. It's the relationships. It's all the stuff, all the magic that's happening inside the room. And I want to quote Claude Silver, who is the chief heart officer of VaynerMedia. She said to us offline that the room was fertile. Like, you guys can plant anything you want, because that's how open everyone is. And what she meant by that was everyone is so vulnerable, trusting, and loving. We had no idea that was going to happen as a result of just giving and offering value and bringing in keynote speakers at that level. And what happened was the podcasting sort of became a side thing where it's like a nice to have for the podcasters to like record content. And then the entrepreneurs to come in and be like, oh, wow, I'm associated with that podcaster and I'm now speaking to the tribe that they've built and nurtured over time. I sort of sped through that process. So thank you. So like all of that starts to happen, but then the networking, the pre-event training, we train entrepreneurs on how to best tell their story, find clarity in their message. So like all these really cool things happen throughout the experience. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
It's not pretty much it. That was one of the most amazing events I've ever been to. And let me, like I've said this multiple times, I don't know what I was expecting. I just got more than I was expecting, right? I've been on the virtual events, but you're right, the vulnerability piece. And it started with you guys and your keynotes. Like it was so easy to be vulnerable, and everyone knew and felt safe in that environment. And there's not a lot of, actually, there's no other place that I could think of that I've ever felt that way on a Zoom room, that I would have shared anything or heard the stories one after another that we were hearing. And then the other piece that we shared, because I don't believe in coincidences ever. I just feel everything happens exactly how it's supposed to happen, and you're given the opportunity that God gives you to do whatever it is that you're supposed to do. So what's crazy is we didn't know what to expect. Corey started reading this book, Profits First, on Saturday or Sunday. And then he tells me about it on Monday. And I'm like, okay, that sounds fine. Right? Like literally, this is our conversation on Monday because we have a weekly meeting on Monday. And then Tuesday was Podmax. Well, Tuesday comes, our first guest wasn't available. So we had Rocky, right? Who just happened to come into our room because he didn't have his interviewer. We didn't have a guest. They're like, oh, go together. And what does Rocky do? He teaches Profits First all over the place. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I've never seen Corey ever so excited for a guest in my life. And I've known him for 6 years. Right. And I was like, wow, he doesn't do that for me. I'm jealous. Like, it's very sad. but he must see me too much. I don't know. I see Corey more now in Zoom world than I do in real life ever. But so we have what? February 26th is the next Podmax.
Yeah, so I have something for your listeners here. Yes, that is the main event, right? The big thing that we're all talking about. You got to come February 26th, sign up at podmax.co. But we have a free get a little taste of the community, get the vibe of the tribe this Friday, February 6th, I believe. Is it 6th? Where we 5th, sorry, February 5th, we have what we're calling, it's the first ever, but we're going to continue to do this, the Podmax Mixer. So what that is the community comes in, everyone who wants to understand and know and feel what it's all about gets to come in. There's no charge. And we're going to do some activities. We're going to do what you guys, have grown to love, is we're going to engage, ask questions, give people the stage. But then at the same time, we're going to incorporate some really cool new stuff that I think is going to eventually make its way to the main stage. But yeah, we're excited about it. So it's podmax.co/mixer. And that's where you sign up and get the link and all the information you need.
What time?
It's 11 to 12:30 Eastern Standard. Yeah. Okay. Oh, thanks for that. Awesome.
Welcome.
Yeah, 11 to 12:30. You said?
Yes, that's 90 minutes
for Eastern. Yeah. I'll be in Vegas. Maybe I'll be able to. Oh no!
Yeah. Let's talk about this Vegas thing for a second. Corey and I haven't talked about this. So Corey goes, "Hey, do you want to go to Vegas?" I was like, "Sure, let's go." And he goes, "It's the Super Bowl." I was like, "Oh, like I can't." That's like my wife's and I like holiday. We do a party thing. It's fun, so I can't go. And I'm like super jealous that he's going to Vegas on the Super Bowl because I totally want to go.
Yeah, I could. Actually
my wife said I could go, which is even worse.
Take your wife.
Yeah, but his wife isn't going. That's the problem.
Take your wife, Corey.
You got kids. Someone's got to watch the kiddos.
Yeah, so. Take the kids.
My wife can watch Ron's kids too. We'll see.
Oh yeah, okay. I love that.
All right, last question for me, Eric. And let's stick around the Podmax theme. If I have never heard of Podmax, I have my business. I need to be at Podmax because
it's the unique and only podcasting event that you need to go to. no one's doing what we're doing. So you have to come and see what it's all about, really.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that because I'm going to. This is an easy one because I know the answer, but you don't even need to have a podcast to go to Podmax. So we had someone that we interviewed, and we asked her about her podcast, and she goes, "I don't have one." We're like, "Wow!" Right? So she just comes to get her message out to be heard and learn from the amazing guests. Right? So is that a true statement?
Yeah, that is the ticket holders. We call them Maxers, but I think everyone at this point, we're going to call, Maxers and Podmax. But yeah, if you want to get on shows, you have a business, you have a story or a message that you want to share with communities that are already baked in. They have trust, a level of trust from their hosts, and you get to stand on their platform, tell your story 3 in one day, and then everything happens to you. You don't even realize what's happening. And you're like, wow, how do I continue to coming to these every single month? But right. Yeah, that's, I think, thank you for that, Ron, because it's truly something that is hard for us to describe because of the fact that it's so many things. But first and foremost, it's all about a place, like you mentioned, Ron. It's a safe space for you to share, to be vulnerable, and meet like-minded individuals that have an abundance mindset. Truly.
Yeah.
And just one piece to add to that too, the level of which every person was, it was also different, right? Like I'm sure you've had people show up on your show and you're like, oh, why am I interviewing you? Why, why are we having this conversation? And so from the people that we were able to interview, but even just the entire room, you can tell like, oh, I want to interview him and her. And I want to interview everyone. How do we get to know everyone? Like, let's go. It's in a candy shop, right? Like it's kind of how you feel with the quality of people that were in that room. So definitely you and have just developed such a culture that again, Ron and I, we were blessed to be asked and to be there and thankful that we can continue to go forward. So definitely
love it. Love that. And love you guys. Thank you so much for all the support and, just singing our song because it has to be heard in order for people to come. And I think we attract, right, all like-minded individuals. So yeah, the more you guys sort of put this out there, I appreciate it because you guys are part of us. You have the same DNA. And let's just keep finding our tribe and helping it to grow. So appreciate that.
I love it. All right. So Erik, I'm sure people are like, oh my gosh, I got to get involved. Where can they find you? How can they get connected?
Yeah. So the Mixer is a great place to come and check us out live. And that's podmax.co/mixer. And just go to the website, podmax.co is the place to go when you want to learn more. You can sign up as a host if you have a podcast. Usually our criteria is about 50 episodes. You're consistent on your social media. You have a following. So those are hosts that we're always looking for. But then also we're looking for guests. We're looking for people that want to be on different types of podcasts and then also be a part of a unique networking experience.
Perfect. All right, Erik, thanks again for sharing your time with us. Definitely honored to have you here. It's been a blast, and definitely we will see you on Friday, 2-5 at the Mixer.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Bye.
All right. Who's pumped? I know I'm pumped. How about you, Ron? You pumped?
Oh my gosh. I learned so much. Like, I want to go buy stuff. That's what I've learned. Like my wife is probably not going to be happy after this episode because I might buy a company or two.
Blame Erik.
That makes sense. It made like he wrote it. I was like, that made sense. That's like you're skipping ahead. You're like cheating on a test. That's amazing, right?
Yes.
That's not my takeaways. That's just my statement.
Go buy businesses.
Just my statement. So obviously, it's 2 takeaways. Obviously, if you've listened to the show, I have a lot, so now I have to whittle it down. But the other piece that the big one that I'm going to talk about is the calendar piece, right? Because we block off time, but we still have a to-do list, right? And sometimes that stuff doesn't vibe, right? I love the best practice where he's talking about he does a creative block here, right? He does admin block here. He does a business block here. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's what I needed. And maybe I just needed that because I think funny. So hopefully that helps somebody else that thinks funny. But I loved that. And then the other piece, he didn't exactly say it, but he talked about it at the beginning of his journey. Be a learner, but take action. If you're just a learner and you don't take action, doesn't get you anywhere. That's called a waiter. Like you're not getting anywhere. You're just waiting for something to happen, and it's probably not going to happen.
Yep.
You have to take action steps.
He was talking about find people that know more than you. Start right, but it's all irrelevant if you don't implement. So implementation is key. But one other piece that I don't know if many people caught, and that was the start of the journey, and that is doing an audit of your situation, doing a self audit of where you are at and where you want to go, because otherwise, what's that definition of insanity, right? You keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. And so we definitely don't want that. So do a self audit, figure out those steps that you want to go. And then, everyone, if you paid attention at all, we want you at Podmax with us, podmax.co/mixer to get the event happening this Friday, or February 26th, there is going to be a full event, full day of awesomeness. And I know there's going to be some amazing people there. So we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, guys, thanks for being the best part of the Hindsight Hackers community.